Speaking of the results, the time is 7:40. We have about 2% reporting coming in. We were just talking about this U.S. Senate Republican primary, and you see Buddy Carter right now at 27%, sandwiched in the middle there between Mike Collins at 43% and Derek Dooley at 26%. Once again, still very early as we continue to monitor to see if those will flip. Over to the governor's race, where we have seen a pretty contentious battle between the two top vote getters right there so far, Burt Jones and Rick Jackson. Burt Jones at 37%, Rick Jackson at 36%, and Brad Raffensperger holding the third spot right now, 14% with just 2% reporting. Let's go over to the other side of the aisle to the Democrats, where we see former Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms still holding a strong lead there at 64% of the vote. Mike Thurmond coming in at second, 11%. Jason Estevez gaining about 2% here from 9 to 11% since the last time we checked. But once again, 2% reporting. These numbers could change. We're also looking at the lieutenant governor's race, the Republican primary there. John F. Kennedy at the top there, 27%. Greg Dolezal, the state senator, at 22%. And Blake Tillery at 21%. Let's see the Democrats on that side as well. We have Josh McLaurin in the top here, 40% of this vote right now. Nabila Parks, 35%, as well as Richard Wright, 25%. Once again, guys, 2% reporting, but that candidate, Josh McLaurin, leading by about 4,500 votes. We're also looking at the Secretary of State Republican primary, Tim Fleming, 37% of this vote here. Vernon Jones at 29% and Kelvin King sitting at 17%. We'll see if these numbers continue to change or if these gentlemen will hold these spots. Over on the Secretary of State for the Democrats, Judge Benny Brown Reynolds at 42% of the vote so far. Dana Barrett, 34%, and Cam Ashling at 13% of the vote. So these are the vote totals that we are seeing, just 2% reporting for this. Now, this is actually a different race here because with the Supreme Court of Georgia justice seats, these will be decided tonight. Right now, incumbent Charlie Bethel sitting at 59% of the vote. Miracle Rankin really trying to unseat him here. Right now, she is just holding 41% of the vote with 2%. Let's see, Jen Jordan, Sarah Hawkins Warren, the incumbent, really holding a strong lead here at 65% of the vote. Jen Jordan, the former Democratic state senator, at 35% of the vote. So we'll see if these numbers, these leads, these positions will hold, because unlike the other races we're talking about tonight, we will know who will be the next Supreme Court of Georgia, the next Supreme Court justices of Georgia, or if we will see those incumbent races. So Zach is going to be driving the map here because we have a deeper look at the different heats, which counties are reporting for these statewide races, especially as we look at governor and Senate. Zach, it looks like you have the Republican primary pulled up right now.
Yeah, and this gives us an opportunity to really kind of narrow in and take a look county by county here. So I want to bring our panel in. Stephen and Fred, let's talk first about this Republican gubernatorial primary here. Stephen, let's talk about you first and what you are seeing when you look at this map. What are the counties that you really look for in a Republican primary as indicators of what the mood of the electorate is and who has captured the enthusiasm of Republican primary voters?
Yeah, really interesting map here so far. I mean, I think what you're seeing, obviously, I think the big takeaway for Fred and I both is that those metro Atlanta counties have not reported. Obviously, that's going to be the deal breaker in any election in the state of Georgia. But I think what I'm always looking at are the exurban Atlanta counties, right? When we talk about Cherokee, Forsyth, Hall, some parts of Gwinnett. You know, when you look at those, Barrow County, for instance, Fayette County, that's where really Republicans are going to look to pick up the most votes. Those counties will be determinants of who I think will emerge in this primary. But I think what you're seeing right here is that Burt Jones looks to have a strong advantage in rural Georgia. We know that the lieutenant governor is from a rural county. He has built up a base of support in rural Georgia. And then you're seeing Rick Jackson in some strong spots in more populated areas. You know, you look at some of the western portions of Georgia, obviously looking at counties in North Georgia. So really, obviously very early, but those are some trends I'm looking at so far.
And Fred, let's flip over to the Democratic side of this. And essentially, same question to you. What are the core counties? I think I know the answer on this one. But what are the core counties that Democrats are paying the most attention to tonight?
Well, very similar to what Stephen said. You know, you have your core five of Fulton, Clayton, Cobb, Gwinnett, Henry, and metro area that we have more than 50% of the statewide vote is concentrated in those 5 counties.
They also often tend to be the ones that can take the longest to report.
Absolutely.
So as you look there on your screen, we're still waiting.
Absolutely. But, you know, to Stephen's point about the exurb counties, I really like the way he said that. When you look at the same, we have the votes are concentrated for both parties in very similar areas. Now, the margin, you know, in the general election might be different, but the proportion within the party is pretty similar. So you look at Cherokee, you look at Douglas. Douglas is a county that used to be very Republican, that in the last 10 years or so has become more Democratic. And so looking at that, and that's also a bedroom community for Atlanta/Fulton County. And so one of the big questions for Democrats internally is how would Mayor Bottoms do right in and around Atlanta, given that she was mayor there? Would people remember that fondly, or would they focus more on the controversy? And so while we're waiting on Fulton and DeKalb to come in where the city of Atlanta split, Douglas is the closest thing to that, and she's doing really well right there, 67%, actually outpacing her already pretty wide margin that she has statewide. So that's a major one there. And then we'll also look, once we get out of metro Atlanta, we'll look down into the coast. So we'll look at Chatham County over there in Augusta and Savannah. There's other places, and Macon. So, and then the other thing you'll want to look at as Democrats, especially if you're the Estevez campaign, is you're going to look at down there Muskogee, where he is from. And if she runs away with Muskogee, it's going to be pretty difficult for him or anyone else to catch her. So Muskogee, Bibb, and those areas. One thing on the Republican side, I'll be really interested to see how the 14th congressional district, where Donald Trump elevated Clay Fuller, how Burt Jones does there. That'll give us a real good sense of the power of the Trump endorsement within the Republican primary. That more than anything else, because that's where he really made the difference just here recently. So on the Republican side, I'll be looking at that. And then as a Democrat, as we look forward to November, we'll be looking at that as well, places where we can figure what.
And I'll say something from a Republican looking at the Democrat side. We've talked about polling. We've talked about a lot of these things. This is the race that is, I think, not tracking what the public polling so far is showing. I mean, right now, again, it is very early, but Keisha Lance Bottoms is running away with this very early. I think it's just a question of how much at this point is she going to win by? Is she going to be able to clear that 50% plus one threshold?
And speaking of that polling, we were talking about this in break a bit. With all of these polls, we saw the trends that I believe are kind of lining up with what we're seeing right now, minus Jeff Duncan, because I know that he had a little bit of that. But the biggest number that we saw with these polls were undecided voters. Even leading up beyond early voting, you had people who did not know who they were going to pick. So is it, and I pose this question to both of you, can that early voting number, as these reports are, as these numbers continue to report, could that early voting number be an influence that we're seeing that's not necessarily matching up with the polls? Could it create potentially Jason Estevez or Mike Thurman minimizing that margin there?
Well, yeah, so one thing I do want to say, I'm glad you said it that way, Faith. We don't want to get ahead of ourselves because all 3 candidates have various points of strength in the metro. And let's not forget that Michael Thurman was the CEO of DeKalb County. He just left that position about a year or so ago, and DeKalb County usually has the most or the second most Democratic votes in the entire state. And so if he does really, really well, let's say he wins DeKalb County more than 50%, that's going to shrink that margin and pull Mayor Bottoms down below 50%. And he also figures to do well in Fulton County. And so there's a lot to be said right now, a lot to be determined. This is a good early start for her. But there was that one poll that I think most people consider to be an outlier, the Insider Advantage poll, that had Mayor Bottoms at over 50%, and everyone else, all the other polls had her between 38 and 40-something%, with, to your point, about 30% undecided. But I think, again, like I mentioned, Muskogee will be important for Estevez. DeKalb is going to be really, really important and determinative, I think, for this whole thing when DeKalb comes in, and whether or not Michael Thurman is in there.
Yeah, no, totally agree. I mean, DeKalb's going to be a very strong indicator for Michael Thurman as the results are coming in, as will the other metro Atlanta counties for the other Democrats. I think to your question, Faith, on the undecided, I believe that Rick Jackson was the worst thing that could happen to Mike Thurman, Jason Estevez, and Jeff Duncan, because it shrank that window for them to be able to break through so much and put so much downward pressure on their ability to break through that when you look at the undecided voters, because former Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms had so much of a head start going into that it really, if you break out the undecideds and they trend along that break line, it may be a good night for Keisha Lance Bottoms.
Well, but I would say to that, to your point, it did put downward pressure, but that helped the people who naturally had name ID already. Mayor Bottoms being one, but Michael Thurman as well. And 78% of the Democratic votes that were cast during early voting came from people 50 and over. That's Michael Thurman's sweet spot. So I agree, and that hurt Jason Estevez and Jeff Duncan and the others, and it probably really helped Mayor Bottoms and Michael Thurman, two people who are already established long-term in Atlanta.
And I'm glad that you mentioned that too, Fred, because it's really going to depend on who exactly is going out there and voting. You see the social media posts of people, oh, I like this, I think that, but which demographic? And then also with former Mayor Bottoms, I'm interested in seeing Fulton County numbers because she, depending on who you ask, has a lot of baggage. Some people really, came after her about not serving 2 terms, leaving the city behind. And of course, she governed during a time that was not the easiest, right? We were in COVID and there was a lot of unrest going on. But she, stayed 10 toes down a lot of during the debates and during basically answering to the fact that she wanted to be with her family. This time was not right, but I think that the numbers are truly going to see if her messaging throughout this campaign is playing to what people say that they were feeling, what some people said they were feeling, and will those votes go to Mr. Thurman, Mr. Duncan, or Mr. Estevez? That's what I'm watching for to see when those Fulton County numbers come out, and they notoriously come out pretty late, so we might have to wait for that for a little.
We are going to be watching for as long as it takes.